This is all theater. This is all just political theater.
Political theater. Political theater.
Pure political
Theater.
Theater.
Political theater.
The
nefarious,
Significant and protracted
political
theater for political theater's sake.
I yield back.
From Washington, this is Political Theater, Roll Call's review of the spectacle of politics on Capitol Hill and across the country. I'm Jason Dick. Raoul Peck is the Academy Award-nominated director of such films as I Am Not Your Negro, about the writer James Baldwin, and Lumumba, about Patrice Lumumba, the assassinated prime minister of Zaire. His new documentary, Orwell, 2 + 2 = 5, about the author George Orwell, a writer so important and iconic he has his own adjective, Orwellian, comes at a time when politicians are deploying language that will be right at home with the forces of Big Brother in Orwell's landmark novel 1984. Representative democracy has always been tested, being a relatively new governmental structure, but it's as if the very concept of objective truth and rational thought is under attack as well. Raoul Peck, welcome to Political Theater.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Your film is incredibly timely, I think, for what we're experiencing in politics, not just in the United States, but worldwide. Before we get into more of the subject matter and how you constructed the story and the documentary facets of 2 + 2 = 5, I'm just curious where Orwell came to you in life. Because for me, I remember as a kid, now granted, my parents very kind of politically, connected, and my mother's a school teacher. So I saw the cartoon of Animal Farm as a kid and then read it in middle school, junior high. And then in 1984, when I was, about to enter high school, those commemorative 1984 paperbacks came out with the, big poppy or, Warholian, if you will, lettering. And then in college, I read The Road to Wigan Pier, which really kind of blew me away in a post-industrial society history class at the University of Arizona. What about you? When did Orwell come into your world and your line of thinking?
Well, to say the truth, I read 1984 in school and Animal Farm as well. But Orwell was always a very far away character for me. I grew up in a different reality. So anything that had the sound...
Haiti, you're native
I'm
Haiti.
from Haiti, and then I grew up in Congo under Mobutu. My parents were working for the UN, so we were, and my father was arrested in Haiti twice, and then he had to leave because, he knew that the dictatorship would come after him. And so I grew up in a sort of reality. Science fiction was never, a skill that I liked or I was almost amazed by the absurdity of reality. Wherever I was, whether in Congo, Zaire, or in France, or in Germany, where I spent 15 years studying. So Orwell was kind of far away until this project and of course I read about essays, and I always appreciate the clarity of his writing. But then when I started, immerse myself for this project, I slowly discovered a different Orwell that was closer to my own reality. Mm-hmm. And I also profoundly understood that, in fact, he was not writing about some sort of future republic. He was talking about his own experience.
Right. As a policeman in Burma.
Absolutely.
And yes.
And as, volunteering at 19 to become a policeman in Burma when he could have continued. He was at Eton and could have gone to Cambridge or Oxford. He decided to, like his father, to go to the army and spent 5 years in Burma. And that's where somehow I found a connection with me, because it basically, Burma is my kind of city, you would say, but it's the third world. Mm-hmm. And he was confronted with authority or with the colonial, forces, and he was on the bad side, and he recognized that. And that brought me closer to him, because he did a very humble thing of writing about it in the 30s when, a lot of African countries were still colonized. There were a lot of dictatorships around the world, but very humbly, he admitted what he did there, and he was not proud of it, and he criticized his home country about what they were doing in Burma and in India, and so I learned a new Orwell, and it was that allowed me to make a much more organic and intimate film.
And the film, the way it comes together is truly it's kind of breathtaking how you, not to use film speak, if you will, like cliches, but you weave in his autobiography with clips from newsreels, from like contemporary footage as much as we can from World War II, from he died shortly after World War II, in the years after World War II, but in the 30s and the 20s we have like contemporary versions, and then contemporary life in Burma, among the others, or Myanmar,
First of all, I knew that I was not making a biography. I always, whether Baldwin, Marx, or others, Ernest Cole, it's about telling a story. And telling a story means that you have a character, you have a dramatic development, you have contradictions, you have poetry, you have music. So it's a different kind of film you're making. And so I had to choose what is that story, what is the minimal story I'm saying. And for me, it was, let's take him at a moment of his life where it's very dramatic. He's trying to finish 1984. It's the last year of his life. Is in and out of hospitals, sanatoriums. He doesn't know if he will finish the novel. And that was, for me, the key to the opening, to start then look in all the different stations of his life. India, where he was born, Burma, Myanmar today, of course, the UK, France, and the Spanish War.
Right.
That was an important moment in his life.
A lot into 46 years of life.
Oh yeah,
I feel like a real slacker.
That's incredible. He died very young, and to have gone through all those experiences, it's incredible. And what he was able to take away from them and basically write down the toolbox of authoritarian regime. And the mistake that during the Cold War that people made is that, as if he wrote exclusively against the Soviet Union or Stalinism, but in fact he was writing down the very matrix of how authoritarian developed. What are the signs? What is the language? What are the structure? How does the society react to that? And so he basically debunked all that. And that's why we can use it today to analyze what's going on, not only, as you say, in the United States, but in many other places in the world.
And I'm curious, how were you able to say, this is just the world that I'm going to deal with? Because there's so much going on. I mean, within the film, you've got the biographical aspects of his life and where he was coming from, as you sort of elucidated here. But we've also got Ukraine, we've got what's going on in Gaza, in Burma. I mean, it's just with the Rohingya, like I'm curious how you edited it down, because it's a lot to deal with.
Well, it's a lot, but it was necessary to bring back the simultaneity of everything happening in the world. I know it's a lot to pack, and I can see it in the reactions of the audience, and it's like a shock for them, because we have learned how to isolate ourselves and just see our own little bubble and follow the news, because as you see in the news, there is a week about Ukraine, and then another week about something else, another day about another subject. We are being fed by breaking news every day, and thus letting go a sort of more universal look at what is happening in the world, because we are connected. Whatever happened in the US, whatever happened in Portland, whatever happened in New York is linked to whatever consequence that will happen elsewhere. So what the film does is to put on the foreground the simultaneity of all those places of war, places of misery, places of ending of democracies, and so to show that it's possible everywhere. Orwell himself, he says, he plays the story of 1984 in London because he wanted to make sure that we understand that that kind of system can happen anywhere, including in the Western world. And we are in the verge of looking at such a transformation here.
I'm curious if you saw, I mean, you have your filmography is quite vast and goes back decades. But I want to just talk about one other film and maybe some of the similarities you may see between James Baldwin, subject of I Am Not Your Negro, and Orwell, because I see their writings as equally just sort of diamond cutting prose, just cutting right through all the bullshit to get at the meat of so much of the injustice that they saw in the world.
And what links them both is exactly what you said. It's cutting through the bullshit, and because they went somewhere else, they met the other. What we call, when you never left your country, everything else is sort of obscure, sometimes savage territory. But these men left their own country and learned to know who the other is, who are the foreigners, who are the immigrants, who are the illegals, as you would use today as a word. And that changed them. They start reflecting on who they are as a human being, and they start seeing the other as fellow human beings, and that changed their view totally. And that's why I could as well trust Baldwin and trust Orwell's point of view, because I knew he understood my world. He went there, he saw things, and he analyzed them and felt them. He was never just an intellectual, going through books and learning about the world. No, he went through the world, and at the price of his own danger, he put himself in danger. So that brings respect, and that makes their writing more solid, because they could lighten up from different perspective, and usually they learn more about their own countries through that than somebody who never left.
Well, and particularly the way that their countries influence where they're going. And yeah, I feel like I think there is a through line with a lot of your work, and that you're focusing on people who speak truth to power, and most of the time pay a heavy price, in somebody like Lumumba, which you made a documentary of as well as a feature film on him. I'm curious. I feel like I think these two films will be linked just because I saw them in sequence. But the film One Battle After Another by Paul Thomas Anderson, about a revolutionaries and the long tail of revolutionary and protest activity confronted with a sort of fascist state. I mean, they'll be, in my mind, forever linked. And I try not to think too much about that. But as a thought experiment, if you're looking at where we're at now in 2050, do you see 2025 as this tipping point year?
No, because in fact, I remember when I started working on Orwell, I thought Kamala Harris would be president today. And the film was as important for me at that time than it is today. Because the problem didn't start with the present administration. There have been a deconstruction of everything since at least Ronald Reagan. The constriction of the press, or the reorganizing of the whole press, whether it's TV, news, newspaper, or the deconstruction of press, the fact that there is no local press anymore, basically, in this country. The fragmentation of society. and it came from the economy as well. I remember during the oil crisis, as we used to call it, people forget what were the consequences. That's when they start cutting budgets.
Mhm.
They start cutting social programs, etc., etc. So I don't see that as something that suddenly happened because a majority of voters voted for a president. No, I think it had been long in the making of what do you say, breaking some of the structure of this republic,
Mhm.
degradation of the whole political powers, Congress, the fragmentation of society, the press becoming more and more a press of opinions, of clashes, and not of healthy discussion with arguments, with numbers, and that we pay a price for that today, even academia, this attack in academia that, of course, I don't agree with, but we have seen the last 40 years many attacks of academia. There have been a cleansing within academia about certain ideas, about a way to discuss things. There were intimidation. I know professors of my generation who were let go because of their ideas. So this is nothing new. It's just a sort of acceleration,
That's-
and then we are looking at the ugliness of it,
Yeah.
and we can't look away now.
I guess I think I see the accelerant more than I have tended to focus on this because being the editor of a newsroom that chronicles Congress is particularly supine right now.
Yeah.
I mean, they're abdicating their own constitutional responsibilities, letting the courts, letting the White House kind of call the shots.
Can I interrupt you
Of course.
one moment? Because I remember on the first Trump time, people in Congress, Republican, a few of them start saying something. And then I saw that each time it was somebody that will not go for a re-election.
Yeah.
I said, oh my God, this is a problem. It means basically censorship, that none of those elected officials dare say something that would go against the prince. And he could only do that when he's going away from politics.
Yeah,
That's a sign.
Very few exceptions. Yeah, like anyone running within a very closed party system. I mean, it works. It's worked in. There have been faint hints of dissension among some Republicans in places like Alaska and Maine, where there's a more open primary process.
Yes, yeah. So that was already scary for me because I saw that as signs. When you have live in dictatorship, you recognize those signs very early on.
Mm-hmm.
Society might not see them immediately, but you start asking your question, where is this going? Because the cutting of dissents is start when you can't really fully tell what you're thinking.
Right.
It's a self-censorship, by the way.
Yeah.
It started like this because you are afraid of your position. You're afraid of the consequence of what you're saying. So we talk about freedom of speech in this country like as if it's natural. No, it needs that you act upon it, that you prove that you have the freedom of speech. Otherwise, it's just emptiness.
No, I feel like it is a continual test.
Yes.
That again, this is, most Americans, they know primarily, an American system of representative, democracy. But that is the vast exception for in human history and even in contemporary history.
But it needs to be defended every day.
Yeah.
And it can go away. That's also, it's not because it was there for the last 40, 50 years. And we forget that, there were time of censorship in this country. The McCarthy era, by example.
Yeah.
There are many instances.
The Alien and Sedition Act.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and sometimes against the black population of this country. where they didn't have, the possibility to talk their minds. So democracy is always something you have to defend and renew. It's never there forever. It's something, like the same way people died to allow voting, and to, women, indigenous, Black people, they were out of the Constitution at the beginning. They had to fight for that.
Yeah.
And now a lot of things are again under question, and we need to react to that.
Before we go, let's talk a little bit about where people can see your movie. It's being kind of rolled out. It was at Cannes, but in festivals, but now it's being rolled out. I saw the poster for it at the AFI Silver in Silver Spring. But it'll be what?
Well, it opened in New York and LA this week, and then I think we are going to some 45 cities, and then from there it will open in even more cities. That's the plan.
I think that there is an audience, just based on my small, kind of survey of people who have heard of the movie or are talking about it.
Well, we had the best first weekend ever for a documentary film in New York. So that was a big encouragement. And I can see in discussion with the audience, it's like they feel that at least they have some questions formulated and they can imagine some responses, because people are lost because this is so massive.
Yeah.
The idea of flooding the zone, well, it's a success.
Yeah.
People have barely the time to breathe, and sometimes journalists are, going after that, breaking news after breaking news, and there is hardly time to pause and say what's going on here.
Yeah.
It's an accumulation of news after crazy news sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I can see how the film brings some coherence in that chaos.
I do think so. Encourage folks to check it out. I mean, as a former English teacher and a literature major, I feel I'm almost contractually bound to say that to encourage people to delve into the life of our great authors. But thank you so much, Raoul Peck, for talking. Yes, and before you go, we have a segment on the podcast called Word of the Week, and I think that what's perfect is an Orwellian term from 1984, which is newspeak. This is propagandistic language that is characterized by euphemism, circumlocution, and the inversion of customary meanings, and is primarily used to limit the range of thought. Yes, I couldn't think of a more appropriate word. We've gone a little dark with words of the week lately. Last week it was enshittification, the correctorial term.
A word that is in the film as well.
Yep,
but it's important. I can finish with the last word that I've been using those last days about. Orwell says the degradation of language is the condition for the degradation of democracy. And when you start there, when words doesn't mean the same, when you're using words to mean the contrary of what you're actually thinking or actually doing, when you say, I want peace, and you are bombarding populations, it doesn't quite make sense. So you are lost. You don't know what, I don't know how to speak with you.
Right.
Because we don't have the same vocabulary.
Again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.